Hello ladies, gentlemen, and others. My name is Dan, the voice behind that Kaito Dan, and it's finally the day that I can say welcome to my review for RWBY Volume 9, Episode 1, A Place of Particular Concern. But before we get started, please make sure you've watched this episode first on Crunchyroll to support the show, keep the series going strong, and give love back to the amazing people behind it. Also, don't forget to share your thoughts on this episode and my review in the comments down below, as I will continue to highlight some standouts alongside fan art in future videos. And please, check out my reaction to the new kick-ass intro if you haven't already, which is already out, and I'll be doing a full breakdown of it tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that as well. Oh, and of course, beware, spoilers are ahead. It's been nearly 2 years to the day since I last did one of these. After months of waiting, worrying and speculating, and even more waiting though, we are at long last got a new volume to enjoy. Which is ironic, considering the tragic note that Volume 8 ended on, and the massive cloud of turmoil that hangs over Team RWBY in this latest season. We're in uncharted territory in many ways, as the story takes us out of Remnant and into a mind-bending new location for what looks to be the most emotionally driven chapter of this grand tale, too big for just one world. But as always, when it comes to a premiere chapter, we have to ask, did it manage to get things going on the right foot from the start, or do I feel page 1 of this new tale is already a misstep? For the first time this volume, let's talk about it. Now, the first half of the episode we've actually already seen as part of an early preview from last year's RTX, but it's still important to discuss as part of the whole chapter here, starting with this quick bit of narration from an unknown voice, who says this is the story about a girl with a lot of issues. Yeah, Missy, I think that just about describes about 50% of the entire cast. But given everything that we know heading into this volume, this is definitely not just an opening line from the in-universe story of the girl who fell for the world, which will play a big role in the volume itself. It's also describing our own fallen girl, RWBY, who is set for quite the time in the spotlight, having said issues brought to the surface. As for the voice itself, we don't hear them again in the episode, but they are credited. It's Morgan Laurie Garrett, who you may know as the voice of Rei Todoroki from My Hero Academia, Sol Marin from Black Clover, and Miyu Miyu from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Stone Ocean. Safe bet, this voice is someone that we will meet in due time. After all, this wouldn't be the first mysterious female narrated voice to be later shown as a key character. And with 2 lead contenders on the table for who it could be, I'm willing to bet that it's the mysterious blacksmith character seen in the intro and trailers, simply due to it being the more fitting, mature sounding character. After a rather long couple of seconds hearing just a steady heartbeat grow faster, we relive the explosive events at the central location from the point of view of RWBY. The perfect way to refresh us on what came before and immediately set the emotional tone at a high with the frantic nature of it all, the desperation in RWBY's voice, and the suspenseful trance music in the background. Already, I am loving this volume's use of atmosphere in the music and in its visuals. And on a side note, I love the little detail of seeing wisps of silver power form around RWBY's eyes in this shot. Very nice attention to detail. We also have this brilliant small moment of stillness in the intensity as RWBY slowly floats near the end of the void, where all you just hear is RWBY trying to calm her breathing. A brief moment of peace that's perfectly used to fake us out, so we feel just as spooked as RWBY gets when Neo suddenly flies in, raging. That is some brilliant immersive directing there, really forcing those watching to feel what the character is going through in the moment. And 2, jeez Neo, you're still wanting to kill RWBY as you float to your possible death? Talk about blind rage. I do think though this moment of her shifting into some of RWBY's allies, especially Penny, will have a bit of a lingering impact on Ruby's mind much later on, when she starts likely wrestling with some major self-doubts. Her frazzled mind may be making her think that the real versions of her loved ones are also aggressively mad with her. Just saying, real or not, seeing your friends and family try to kill you ain't exactly a healthy memory for the most composed of minds, much less one on the edge like Ruby's, so I doubt this is something that she will quickly forget. Fortunately, Ruby is able to break free, and the pair fall into a white void where another voice can be heard calling out for Ruby, and I genuinely can't pin down whose voice it is. Either way, it's enough to help wake up the Little Red so we can finally be introduced proper to her new setting, the eye-catching world of Ever After. Now, you'd think Ruby would take advantage of this rare moment to take a breathe after everything that she just went through and clear up her head, but nope, she takes very little time to pick herself up and immediately start exploring, which, yeah, I get that's important too, but still, come on Ruby, after what you just went through, I think you could do with at least a moment of rest or a chance to vent. Heck, it's not long after this that Ruby finds herself stuck in an endless loop in the jungle. This place already playing mind games and we've only just got here. At least it looks pretty though. Definitely gotta give props to those who are behind the art direction for this volume, as this is already a beautiful sight, right down to its unique flora and fauna. And this latest annoyance is enough to send Ruby off into a strop, and at least this moment now, she does take a chance to finally let her sadness wash over her for a bit. And sad as it is still good to see a rare moment of Ruby allowing such feelings to seep through her stubborn outer shell. A rare sight from someone who often masks their pain behind a brave face. Her tears do also bring the rain as well, which makes me wonder if there's going to be other instances of strong emotions forming some weird effect on the world, like a stormy anger. That could make for some cool background visual storytelling. But for now, I think it's also time that we give something to lift the mood. Thus, we are then introduced to a little mouse friend, who's after a cheese plant? I wonder if they taste gooder. Anyway, Ruby helps it out, and her reward for such a good deed? A mouse companion who can talk. Oh god, it's the Tom and Jerry movie all over again, we're doomed! Said speech, by the way, is provided by Lucy Christian, the talent behind Uraraka from My Hero Academia, Nami from One Piece, and Honey from Ouran Host Club. Though this is actually, funnily enough, Lucy's third RWBY role, having already played Little Miss Malachite in Volume 6 and Freya in Volume 7. Making her, I believe, the only non-Rooster Teeth performer with at least 3 notable roles to their name in the series. And as you would expect, there's some cute laughs over this weird oddity, and I do love the little detail that this welcome distraction for Ruby causes the rain to stop. Now she's more focused on trying to explain who or what she is to the mouse than her sadness. But it's quite interesting that such concepts as human, girl, or even Ruby's name is lost on the mouse, and they themselves don't have a name yet due to them being still young, suggesting that they'll get one once they're older. Though with them also attributing Ruby's name as her purpose, there's clearly more to having a name in this world than Ruby or us are used to normally. And jumping ahead a bit, we get the sense that this world is that of a fairy tale, a realm of fictional characters who play out a role in their respective narratives. And the mouse, whom Ruby calls Little for the obvious reference, later explains that they join the heroes and that's partly due to them having nothing to do yet. I wonder then if Little has no prior name because until now they've had no role to play. They weren't a character in an established narrative, thus explaining why they don't understand such identifying labels like human or someone's name, but they get the concept of purposes, because that's all they've known so far, that they exist and they have to wait for something to come along that will give them a purpose they can use to identify themselves with. If that's the case, then I guess Little isn't just going to be sticking around as the comedic relief guide. they too will have, well, a meaningful role to play in a story. The story of Team RWBY's quest to return home. A fascinating angle that really adds to this world's uniqueness, if even the concept of names has more going on than just someone's identification. And I'm curious as heck now to what exactly will be Little's ultimate fate when we do find out what is her true purpose. He says, having already put on his bingo protection board, that Little might die. Oh come on, like the show hasn't already killed off the cute ones before. But that's for the future. For now though, Little offers to bring RWBY to their home and help find her friends, and we are now beginning the proper new content that wasn't seen in the previews, to where we actually see some of them getting reunited, Weiss and Blake to be exact. A shame that we do miss out on their reunion, as I'm sure it would have been very emotional, but the brief moment we do see them sharing joy to the other that they're okay is still nice to see, and it keeps the ball rolling so we can focus swiftly on other interesting stuff, like Weiss avoiding talking about what happened back at the central location. Can't fault her really. I mean, it's a really heavy subject to address, especially with it still being fresh in Weiss's mind. It's really something that's best to open up about only once and when she feels ready, rather than when someone's asking about it multiple times, when Weiss is still coming to terms with it herself, on top of being worried about everyone else's safety. Big props to the direction as well in this moment for doing a great job at letting Weiss's physical reaction speak volumes. That brief moment of hesitation and the fact that we can't see her face wonderfully presents the poor girl's sadness without the need for words, and still giving Blake enough of a clue that it's best to not press the subject right now since it clearly weighs heavy on her friend, which doubles as a early lead up that when Weiss does drop the penny bomb, it's gonna be a very important and big emotional reaction. More welcome yet strange distractions follow on from this in the form of Gamble's Shroud, which I think is the first time we've heard someone refer to a weapon name other than Crescent Rose. But anyway, yeah, it's trapped in a bundle of thorny vines. And Sword in the Stone vibes aside right now, in Weiss's weak effort to make a joke about their struggles, she mentions she's low on dust. Now we know that semblances will still work in this world given what we've seen in the trailers, but I am curious if dust can actually work at all in Ever After, since it's been documented in a past world of Remnant that dust needs to remain within Remnant for it to work. Maybe though there's other forms of ammo in this world that the girls could use in the meantime, or they might find some dust in this world since it does still have weird ties back to Remnant somehow, alongside I imagine the connection to the God Brothers, who of course were the source of the magic which dust was born from, and I do think they have a role to play in this world as well. Either way, this could really weaken the gang's combat options if they're not just having to restrain from overuse of dust, but instead they can't use any period, which should make for some very interesting methods of fighting off foes if the gang is now having to play with a handicap. And get used to this delightful imagery folks, cause Cheerleader Weiss might be one of the last few remaining truly pure moments of positivity before things turn proper grim. It's still cute though, you can't deny, and you can definitely see RWBY's influence on her. Also, don't you dare internet, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, obvious trap is obvious as the pair gets suddenly entangled in vines thanks to Little's brethren and their attempts to catch something. Not sure exactly what they were thinking to catch with a random weapon. Lest I'm mistaken, cats and snakes don't exactly use a katana, well, beside Blake of course. Big respects by the way to the animation team behind all these little ones. It's been noted that making just one mouse model for Little was a massive headache, so I can only imagine what having to make more of them and animate so many all at once must have felt like, and it can't have been easy even with some clever tricks. It is again a welcome bit of levity before things take a turn in the future, especially with RWBY having this perfect look of "oh god, I pray this is just hallucinations from drinking seawater" confusion that is just too perfect. By the way, when the matter gets cleared up and the gang asks the Mouse Leader, voiced by RWBY member and voice of Terracotta Arc, Jamie Battle, if they've seen Yang, did anyone else expect Blake's descriptions to start going off into more romantic angles? Like, she would just go into more detail than needed on Yang's looks, her personality, and so on. Just me? Well, either way, with no luck with the leader, and Little now acting as their guide, kinda, the girls find their way up a nearby cliff for a better vantage point, leading to another instance of trying to get information from Weiss on what happened before all this, and if anyone else may have fallen. They thankfully do change Weiss's response this time, so it's not the same dodging of the question that we got before. That way it keeps things more fresh, and it makes her secrecy sound less obvious. Plus, it is good that she did at least tell some truth with not knowing for sure who else fell, so she's still being a little helpful rather than just flat out ignoring any talk of the past incident. And given the elephant in the room would also be increasingly more painful listening to for RWBY than it would be for Blake, given her close bond with Penny, it does show an appreciated level of respect for RWBY's feelings that Weiss doesn't reveal her fate just yet, knowing full well it would crush the poor girl to hear far more than it would hurt Weiss just to say, which I really appreciate, both in highlighting Weiss's consideration and her understanding of her friend. Suddenly, a loud roar rings out close by, and they soon come across this freaky looking fiend. Meet RWBY's own version of the classic Wonderland creature, the Jabberwalker, or in this case, the Jabberwalker. A twitchy, demonic-looking monster, not unlike anything we've seen from the Grimm, though it's got its own differences. Namely, its head constantly twitching like a kid on a sugar binge, and it speaks in a creepy tone, though only in small words that describe its intentions, like seeking, scouting, detecting. Said voice provided, by the way, by animation lead editor Richard Norman, who, funnily enough, was heard earlier in the episode as that squawking bird. Talk about range. Immediately, there's connections to be made with the Hound, which of course also spoke. So could this mean that this beast is another corrupted human? I mean, I predicted as such in my bingo card, but we can't be sure just yet, since this is a world that we just seen has talking mice in it, so it could just be a talking monster. Nevertheless, I love its hellish design and mannerisms, doing more than enough to stand out from the monsters we've grown used to over the years, and its appearance does a fine job of introducing to us early on some of this strange world's more twisted, darker sides, if something like this can be found here. Naturally, this causes the heroes to prepare for a fight, but RWBY is out of luck with no Crescent Rose, something that I hope we see her struggle with for a good amount of the volume. RWBY has described Huntress weapons as being an extension of the user, and we all know how much RWBY both loves her scythe and attributes a lot of who she is to her identity as a huntress. So, stripping it away from her really sells just how disjointed RWBY is feeling right now, and will continue to feel until she eventually overcomes the trials in her way, to where maybe only then will she reclaim Crescent Rose, and feel truly whole once more as a symbolic capping off of her growth. A simple but effective way of epic visual storytelling that I always enjoy seeing, so I do hope that is the course that's being laid out. But yeah, back to the big beastie, who does charge at the girls before it's quickly caught off by a rock-tossing Yang, looking armless but far from harmless. Sure does say a lot about Yang's strong will to fight that even when looking absolutely knackered and down one arm, she's still actively chasing down something that she seems to have been fighting for quite a bit. Meaning the Jabberwalker as well is also quite tough if it's able to take on Yang. Though I am curious about what exactly it was searching for. Yang chasing after it implies that the Jabberwalker ran at some point, so it can't be trying to look for her now. It also didn't follow up its initial claw swipe at Blake with another attack, rather it just leaned in like it was trying to scout her out. It decides to flee again before the free strike first, so I wonder if it was looking for someone or something else. And though dangerous, it wasn't actively looking for a fight until it saw the girls as a danger, one of the words that it actually said before charging at Blake. It's not gonna be the last time that we will see this fiend, that's for sure, so we'll likely know its full nature in due time. I'm just not quite ready to call on how much of a foe it's gonna be just yet. There may be more to this creature than meets the eye, a common theme that I think this volume is gonna have for sure. Its departure does give way for what should be an immediately sweet tender reunion between the sisters, but Yang initially rebuffs RWBY's concern, with tears in her eyes, frustrated to find the rest of the team having ended up here too, especially RWBY, after Yang ended up here trying to protect her. We learn later on that Yang had started to believe she had died, and her only solace from such a sad fate was believing at least she died, making sure RWBY was still alive. Can't deny, I'd probably be a little upset too if I was in her shoes, feeling like my sacrifice, the only accompanying thought I had left, meant nothing, and we all still suffer together. And heck, even RWBY's comforting words does come with a rather sad edge to it as well, suggesting that she would have willingly jumped into the void if it meant finding Yang, not knowing that she would live if she tried. It's a very humanizing discussion with equal parts sadness and pain, but I love it because of that. Few moments in this series will paint such a clear picture of just how much these two mean to each other than this scene, and props to the sincere performances from both Lindsay and Barbara, who both nailed the bittersweet reunion feel to this moment. And speaking of reunions, yep, you know it was coming. Now it's Blake's turn to show joy that Yang is okay, in a rather touching moment which, big shock, went down rather well amongst the Bumblebee fans, myself included. But even if you don't look at this in a romantic air, it is still a very cute and pleasing moment to see, considering the last time we heard Blake call out Yang's name. The poor girl likely was racked with so much guilt after failing to save Yang, so it's no wonder the often shy and expressing herself cat girl couldn't stop herself this time out from releasing such a big outburst of relief. It's honestly why then I'm glad we didn't get any new romantic progress like a kiss or a flat out confession here, as I feel it would make more sense to focus on the relief aspect of the reunion rather than trying to balance that and their growing feelings, when I would much rather see that latter part be given all the focus with nothing sharing up space in the girls' minds. And I doubt this will be the last time their bond will be put through the ringer, so I'm sure that big moment in their relationship is on the way. But for now, they're all back together, which I've heard some complaints about. Many wishing that the team was divided for a little bit longer, which I can understand. It certainly would ramp up the drama and give the girls a not too common chance to handle internal and external problems without the comfort of the others to support them. However, at the same time, we did just come off a full volume with the gang split up for most of its runtime, so it is going to be nice to have another volume again with all of them facing what comes next together. And considering both the volume's shorter episode count and the story points that's being set up, it's clear that we need Team RWBY as a whole for all of it to work out as intended. So while I can relate in some sadness that the divide wasn't drawn out a little bit longer, I reckon it will work to the benefit of the volume's many plot threads and character arcs that we cover this portion of the story as efficiently as possible, and we move swiftly with a united group. An early benefit of this comes as it's only now that we can finally get the moment where Wise can no longer hide behind being concerned about the others or hiding a face when the topic of what happened at the central location gets brought up again, breaking down into tears before explaining just how bad things went. Of course, capped off with revealing that Penny sacrificed herself, which, shocker, is the last thing an already emotionally rattled RWBY needed to hear. The loss of her dear friend already broke her once in the past, but this time she knows for sure it's permanent. And that, plus everything on her mind, unsurprisingly causes RWBY to faint. As she eventually comes to though, we briefly hear the others discussing not knowing where the Staff of Creation or Neo are, unaware the former is now in Salem's clutches, and Sean was also a fallen one. That's gonna be quite a surprise that I'm eager to see, depending on a few factors, one of which being whether or not RWBY might be mad with Jean for his role in Penny's death. She did think just as Weiss was explaining that Jean was trying to help, but there's no assurances that RWBY will be in the right emotional mindset to remember that before snapping at the lad. And I can't deny, I kinda like to see that moment just to see the fallout. And okay, this right here, RWBY's reaction to Yang asking if she's okay, this is a major example to what kind of person RWBY is, and more importantly, what I expect will play a big part of RWBY's upcoming development, cause she just brushes the question off to confirm that Neo is indeed here, with no further talk about how she's feeling being given. Let's not mince words here. RWBY is absolutely terrible when it comes to expressing her deeper pains. Oh sure, sometimes they do slip through the cracks, but for the majority of her life, she's always trying to bottle up whatever weighs heavy on her heart so she can focus on either helping others or simply avoid thinking about such misery because it hurts too much. And that's not healthy at all, especially when it comes to how she handles the deaths of loved ones. Think back on some of the other instances where RWBY broke down when this was pushed right in her face. At the Vital Tournament, she broke down, ironically at Penny's previous death, and after that, she lost herself to her emotions when seeing Pyrrha die, causing her Silver Eye's power to burst out before fainting. Then, the fear of more loved ones dying led to other instances of her emotions exploding into Silver-Eyed Blast, and then, just recently in Volume 7, she went from bravely standing up to Salem to being left a crumpled, crying heap in Yang's arms when taunted with Summer's death. What's worse though, is each response she has after these massive reactions. Penny's first death, she snaps out of it to focus on fighting. Pyrrha's death, RWBY briefly tears up talking about it before the topic moves on and she doesn't get addressed on it again. Salem, she snaps out of a slump only when forced to deal with the issues regarding Ironwood and the Aesops. And now here, she dodges talking about how she's feeling to focus on something else once again. Simply put, RWBY has not and cannot process such strong levels of pain and fear that death can instill in her heart in a healthy manner, as she's never taken a chance to truly vent it all or shed the load with someone willing to listen. Instead, just keeping it all in that bottle along with everything else weighing heavy on her heart, because it truly scares her, and she cannot stand letting that fear hold her back from what she feels is more important. And that's honestly fair considering everything happening in her life. She's still a young girl that had to mature very quickly. Her idealistic views of huntress life got ripped from her in the most brutal of fashion, with death the leading cause. And even before all this, she had to deal with death affecting her family life too. Really, the only time we've seen her come close to doing a decent job of confronting with a death that weighed heavy on her mind was talking to the grave of Summer, and even that is just talking about everything else. She's gone through so much despite her young age, and she just keeps trying to shoulder it with a smile for others' benefit, not her own, and it's only making her pain hurt worse. The longer she keeps such things within herself, the sooner we're gonna see her just absolutely break once it all becomes too much. And now it's almost a guarantee at this point that the breaking point will happen this volume, with this being the first instance of cracks forming in that overstuffed bottle. And I am here for it. This has been something many of us have waited desperately for, to see if it will surely lead to a massive moment of personal growth for RWBY, for someone who for quite a while now has remained kinda stagnant due to this part of her nature causing RWBY to be viewed as a static character next to many within her group who have gone through their own trials and changed in some ways as a result. This big upcoming test of RWBY's spirit is also perfectly timed too, as things seem to be bleakest all around her, meaning it should also make her long-standing role as someone doing all she can to light a bright spark of hope for others feel truly earned and meaningful, because we have known she herself has had to preserve that light in the face of her most darkest days. If you couldn't tell by now, I really like this brief response and what it represents. It's amazing how such a small moment has already left a massive impression on me, and I'm sure this will also have ripple effects on the rest of the team too, and their own personal arcs, seeing RWBY just being breaking apart from the inside out. But for now, the focus is simply to regain Ruby and Yang's missing gear so they can all press on, fully prepared. Though as the episode comes to a close and Blake reveals them that this is not exactly the kind of place where being prepared is going to be coming easy to them, well, let's just say there's going to be a lot more going on to their plate than just their emotional trauma. It's certainly a beautiful shot here, by the way, and the music has this nice uplifting melody to it that is perfect for leaving us off with some semblance of positive hope that things could turn out okay. I just hope that we do have enough time to at least see the gang explore most of Ever After, because we're most likely not coming back once we leave. And with this episode over, we've only got 9 more left, so fingers crossed everything Ever After has in store gets to play their role in this story. Now, to address something major about my wider thoughts on this episode, I think this was a great watch, especially after all this time waiting for a new chapter. But I did also come out of my reaction feeling like it was also not as strong as perhaps it could have been. Now, I wasn't going into this premiere expecting big fight scenes, a ton of super high drama, and monumental plot developments already. This was very much a touching base opening chapter, and that's the right call on the back of such a high-octane chain of events that happened prior to this. We needed things to be a little more slower paced, more subdued and grounded. Yes, even in a wild world like this. That way we are able to start with as clean a slate as possible emotionally before the volume can start introducing new threats, new plot threads, and new emotional high points, knowing that we have had a moment to refresh and recharge first. So with that, I am more than happy with the actual structure of this episode and what it offered to us. The problem though is for a lot of us, myself included, half of this chapter was already stuff we've seen last summer. The RTX preview clip ended at this episode's halfway point. A 17-minute episode already had its first half shown off, leaving about 8 minutes left of new material, not including the intro and credits. And that for me is the biggest cause as to why this episode did feel a little unsatisfying in a very weird way. It oddly felt like I watched only half a usual RWBY episode. Again, I must stress, I very much enjoyed both halves of this episode. I already spoke to great lengths and praise about the amazing, immersive directing in witnessing RWBY's point of view of the fall and her first steps in Ever After, which brought in a great early sense of what to expect from this new realm and its mysteries and dangers within. But that was stuff I have already watched and absorbed into my thoughts long before this volume truly began. And while the second half of the episode had more great character and relationship moments, a good helping of laughs, and more strong visual storytelling, it felt like the episode ended just as it was beginning to get momentum, even though on the whole, it did end at the perfect point to cap off our introduction, leaving us with a breadcrumb of excitement leading into the next chapter, which will be focused on actually exploring the deeper aspects of this world. In my opinion, it was a bad call to have the preview clip be as long as it was, because it robbed this episode of a lot of the in-the-moment excitement that would help this chapter feel more fulfilling. It should have ended just as RWBY cries, but before meeting Little. That way Little speaking is kept a surprise, we still get a good early sample of this place being very unnatural as it plays with your head, and we already make it a point that RWBY's emotions will be a major point of detail this volume. A perfect small sample of what's to come without robbing a sizable portion of this vital episode that's meant to set the tone of the volume. Now, of course, I am talking as someone who did see the previews. As such, it will likely be a different feeling for those of you who didn't and went in blind, so this whole negative point will understandably be a little lost on you. And yes, that's on me for having, I guess, spoiled myself. But we've had previews in the past that haven't taken away as much as this one did. And because of how much it did leave me feeling like something was missing, I have to raise it as a negative point affecting my overall opinion of the episode's quality, unfair as it may be. But again, don't let me making such a noticeable deal about this make you think that I hated this episode, because I don't. The positives I have do plenty enough to still keep this episode comfortably above that negative grading line, and it did accomplish what every premiere chapter must set out to do. Set that tone that we're in for one wild ride driven mainly by the characters and their emotions. So what better way to debut that tone with a premiere full of well-crafted and performed character moments, which this episode was certainly packed to the full gills with. I haven't even gone into praising the music work yet, this of course being the first episode of many to come that won't have any involvement from longtime composers Jeff Williams and Alex Abraham. Instead, we have Casey take it over for her dad, and backed by her OK Goodnight bandmate Martin Gonzalez, who did help on the latter half of Volume 8's score. It's certainly an unenviable task trying to follow in the footsteps of both Jeff and Alex, but to both these two's credit, they have already brought to the table some really strong background tunes, perfectly capturing the strange world's unnatural energy with some trance-flavored instrumentation, while still keeping the core style and identity of RWBY's brand of music. My personal standout piece of the episode being that aggressively bombastic yet chilling backing tune during that opening POV montage. The right kind of sharp, uncomfortable melody that just slotted in perfectly without it overwhelming the focus of letting us feel the panic through RWBY. Though, shout out as well for the series' continued strength in knowing when to let the music take a step back, so the visuals and the voice work capture the scene's vibe by their own merits. And if I could raise maybe one more other complaint with this episode, I do think we could have done with a slightly longer fight with the Jabberwalker, as it came and went rather quickly with only one blocked attack being thrown. Regardless of its true nature and intentions, I think to really make the beast feel like a legit threat, we needed to see more of its capabilities in combat before it chose to flee. The presentation in its movements and voice acting does very well enough to make the creature look freaky and have me on edge, but these can only do so much in terms of trying to set up the kind of truly dangerous aura you want out of such a monster. Though again, we don't know if for sure that's all we can expect from the beast, so just yet, perhaps we could maybe think of this as the tamest level of danger. But with that, let's move on to my episode awards, where I highlight select standouts that I particularly think deserve further praise. Starting with the scene of the episode, which I'm giving to the POV sequence back at the central location. Again, it's a perfect way to recap previous events with a creative presentation, and I truly felt just the insane level of hopelessness, desperation and fear in RWBY. Plus, it also helped establish this volume as one that's going to be focused a lot on the characters' feelings, more so than their actual journey. Character of the episode? I'm going to give it to Little. I think all four of the girls had some very worthwhile positives to take away in this chapter, especially RWBY, but Little is just another example of this series doing a very good job at giving us a character with an entertaining first impression. A small bundle of cute, funny and innocence, but one with some interesting layers to them, making them feel much more pleasing to see as a new tag-along. And finally, the voice acting gold star goes to Lindsay Jones for already dishing out a very raw, human and honest performance rife with effective fragility, whilst still nailing much of the Little Red's usual brand of kindness and quirkiness. So yeah, overall, a solid chapter, but one I also felt was sadly crippled inadvertently, not even by its own hands, with the previews. While it doesn't do enough for me personally to say it matches the highs of other premiere episodes like August Limited, Best Day Ever, or The Next Step, it's still done enough to keep its head well above the water so it doesn't sink to the same levels of some of RWBY's more negatively hefty opening showcases. We still got some good laughs, plenty of mystery and suspense, plus an effective batch of small but worthwhile moments with the girls and their bonds that I think will work even better in the long term as events to come benefit from having the gang together again already. In the end, I'm glad that my only particular major concern was just how some of the episode was presented, because so far, it certainly feels like this is going to be a tale worth experiencing beyond any faults found within its first pages. But those are just my thoughts. Time for you to tell me yours. Did you like the early reunions? Were you pleased with our first moment of Ruby's misery rising to the surface? What's your take on Little, the Jabberwalker, and Ever After as a whole? And were you like me in feeling that the preview did more harm than good if you were one of those who also watched them ahead of this episode? Let me know in the comments down below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe and bell buttons to tick that box and make sure you get every video from me as they drop. Also, follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at ThatKaitoDan for more on anything to do with RWBY, updates on the channel, and more. But until next time, have a good day or a good night, and peace out. It's good to be back.